Hey, and hello, everyone. Thank you for watching this recording today. We are joined today by Allison Alonzy from the Strathmore. Allison is the Director of Patron Experience at the Strathmore, and we're excited to learn more about professionalism from you today. So thank you for being here, Allison. My first question for you today is, can you please introduce yourself, your role, and your organization?
Sure, and thanks for having me, and hi, everybody. Super excited to be involved in this project. Sounds like a fun opportunity. So as Daniel said, my name is Allison Alonzy. I am the Director of Patron Experience at Strathmore. If you don't know Strathmore, it's a multi-venue performing arts organization. We present and produce exemplary visual and performing arts programs for diverse audiences, and we nurture creative ideas and conversations that advance the future of the arts. We host hundreds of accessible and affordable events in the Music Center, Mansion, and our 16-acre campus, as well as a venue up on Rockville Pike called AMP. And we also get out in the community annually. Just in general, as a Director of Patron Experience, I'm responsible for the frontline team. The frontline team includes front of house staff, so house managers, house assistants, ticket office staff members, and then our incredible crew of volunteer ushers and docents, in addition to sort of overseeing the overall customer experience. So I look at the customer experience from the second you buy a ticket or getting to buy a ticket through when you get home and we've thanked you for coming and asked you for your feedback. My position specifically is a member of the operations team. So I work closely with security, our rentals team, housekeeping, event crew, and then of course I work hand in hand with lots of other departments on a regular basis.
Wonderful. We're excited to learn from you today. My next question, which career readiness competency are you going to discuss today, and how does NACE define this competency?
Sure. So I'll be talking about professionalism, and NACE defines it as knowing work environments differ greatly, understand and demonstrate effective work habits, and act in the interest of the larger community and workplace.
Great. And my next question is just to make that connection. How does this competency and a few of those sample behaviors listed by NACE show up in the work that you do at Strathmore?
Sure. So professionalism, I mean, in reality, it should show up on a daily basis in everyone's job, whether it's just from the way you're dressing and presenting yourself through, giving an actual presentation and how you carry yourself. So for me, it definitely shows up on a daily basis in some way, shape, or form. I did find that the sample behaviors that NACE provided are so interconnected that it's really hard to talk about just one without looping in the rest. I will try to focus though on just a few. But in the end, I think the through line through all the sample behaviors comes back to respect, and that's respect for yourself, your colleagues, and your organization, and clearly for sort of anyone else that you're working with in the capacity of your job. So the first one I sort of wanted to focus on most was maintaining a positive personal brand in alignment with the organization and personal career values. I learned very early on in my career. So I've been in, theater performing arts world since I moved to DC in 2005. And then even before that, I worked at a performing arts organization in college. And one thing I learned moving to the DC area is that the theater world is very interconnected. So it's really important to make sure that I was establishing respectful relationships with anyone I worked with, because you never know how people are going to circle back later in your career. So when I first started, I really wanted to position myself as someone who was honest, trustworthy, welcoming, consistent in the way I was treating people. And I decided this based on seeing other people not do these things. And I think it's just really important to think about what you want your reputation to be through your career. Even if you change career paths, like people know people who know people, right? There's always the 7 degrees of separation. So I think it's important to make sure that you're holding true to your core values as a person and make sure you're working with an organization that has the same values. So again, like I met people in passing in conferences over the years who I now work with at Strathmore. I never thought I'd see them again, but I was able to establish a friendly connection. And then here I am now working with some of those people, and glad that I did that, and then I sort of led with a welcoming arm. So that was helpful in not only my career growth and word of mouth, so that if I was applying somewhere and someone was like, oh, I heard Allison's name, it's just nice to have your name associated with positivity and someone who people want to work with. And that was sort of a personal reputation I made for myself early on that worked out for me. And even now, being someone at Strathmore, where I've certainly aligned my core values, or Strathmore's core values align with my core values as a person, it's given me the opportunity to represent senior leadership in third-party meetings. Like I was asked to represent them in a Montgomery County Advisory Council meeting. And I was like, what? That's awesome that they see me as someone who can do that. So you never know what's going to stem from you exuding positivity and being someone that everyone can turn to and know. And even now, like, I was at Ford's Theater for 14 years before Strathmore, and I do the same thing at Strathmore as I did there. And I try to position myself for new people as someone that they can talk to. So being the sort of anchor in the organization, whether I'm asked to or not, that people feel comfortable going to help them feel like part of that organization is really important. And, a big part of my job is working with the public. And so even if I'm not agreeing personally with something someone's saying, it's my duty in my position to represent Strathmore in a respectful way. So even if someone is telling me the experience they had was poor, or, whatever, they didn't feel a connection with the band or the performing arts we did, I always make sure that the end of their experience in expressing themselves was a positive one, and that they've left our conversation feeling heard, and that we're going to work to either resolve their issue if we can, or just be aware of it for the future. So I also think working with an organization, it's super important to know their mission. And when you're invited to talk about the company you work with, the mission and who you're representing, right? So in my opening statement, I certainly talked a little bit about our mission. I didn't, read it verbatim. I sort of changed the mission a little bit to fit into how I was explaining what Strathmore was, but it was important to make sure that I was putting those messages out there as a representative of Strathmore here today. Let's see. And I think the last point I have on this is one thing that I learned early on through just like a random customer service training I was in, was leading with empathy, and knowing that everyone's coming to an experience with a different lived perspective or lived experience. And when you're engaging with someone, or especially working in customer service, you sort of never know where someone's coming from. So if someone comes in and they're late and frazzled, and then they're rude to you, their rudeness to you is not about you. It's about sort of everything that's happened up to that point. And I sort of always try to remember, like, okay, this person may have had a horrible day and now they're here, and I'm not going to make their day worse. I'm going to see how I can make their day better. Okay, so that's the first one. How are we doing on time, Daniel?
Doing great. This is great. I'm taking so many notes as a professional and thinking about presentations I'm giving. So this is wonderful. We're good. Yes.
Right. So the second one I wanted to focus on was being present and prepared. So being present and prepared to me is not just like physically being present, it's also mentally being present and making sure that you are mentally ready for the day. And whether that means for you planning your day the night before, so you know what you're doing, knowing what meetings you're in, so you can be, conscious of what's going on, but then also if you need to prepare for those meetings, like if you're supposed to talk about a certain topic in a meeting, you know what that is ahead of time. So at the meeting, you're not feeling like you're unprepared. Having a task list, so you have direction and you can be self-sufficient. And if you're in a position that typically has someone telling you what to do, write down everything. And if that person's not available, like what can you do that would help things keep moving along without, overstepping or going outside your realm. But if you just have that list, it's really easy to sort of become reliable and know what needs to get done. And again, if you're doing a meeting, presentation, just be prepared, do your homework. So when I do customer service training for my team, we talk a lot about mentally being prepared. And a lot of that has to do with, we all have personal things going on, and sometimes it's easier than others to leave them sort of at the door. but you can't bring whatever's happening with you personally, you can't bring that into the relationships at work and treat your coworkers with anything but respect because of something you have going on in your personal life. So it's really important. I think part of being present and prepared is also being transparent. And if you're having a rough day, it's okay to say that to your supervisor. Certainly you don't need to give, again, it all depends on the environment you're in and the culture of the organization. But I would rather a staff person come to me and say, listen, I'm having a really rough day today. I'm going to try to get through it. I'm going to focus on these 5 things. But outside of that, I just don't have the mental capacity to deal with it. I would rather them say that than them not doing their job. And then I'm getting frustrated as a supervisor, trying to figure out like why they're not picking up their slack today. So that's just one sort of tip about mental preparedness is shutting off the phone, shutting off the news, shutting off the outside influencers, unless they're part of your job, right? Like if you're working on social media, then you can't turn that off. But if you're in a meeting, you are undivided attention, you are listening, you're not doing 4 other things. Like, for example, for me to prepare for this meeting, I have turned off my email. My phone is not anywhere near me. I've turned off my Teams chat, so I'm not getting little dings while I'm here. And that way I'm present and I'm respecting your time the way I hope you're respecting my time when you're listening to what I'm sharing. And then, the last thing I sort of noted here, I would say too, for the parts of your job that you're not confident in, practice. So if you're not comfortable speaking in groups, practice it. If you're not comfortable with the way you organize things, practice a different way of organizing it. There are so many tools out there on how to better these skills that I can certainly share with Daniel that I've learned that are really great too. But just throwing that out there. All right, and then the last one I chose was prioritizing and completing tasks to accomplish organizational goals. So obviously this completely shifts depending on your role in the organization, what your job is, who you're answering to, how it all links in with the mission and what you're doing. But I wanted to sort of share some ways that I prioritize and complete my tasks, because a lot of what I do as a director, I do report directly to our president. I report to the vice president of operations. So there are a lot of people that I'm held accountable to. And if I were to let things slip or not get my tasks done in a timely manner, it doesn't look good for me. And it's not the way I want to represent myself or my department for Strathmore. So personally, I use sticky notes, which is a super simple free thing through Word, I think. And I just have an ongoing to-do list on my desktop that I look at every single day. And I look through the checklist and I'm like, okay, I have some free time. Let me check these things off my list. I also use my email as a way to block out time for myself. So if I know, so like, here's just like an easy example. I knew last week that I had to submit a call for volunteer ushers social media post to our marketing team. So I put it on my calendar, the due date last week, with a time to actually do the work, but then I set myself a week ahead reminder. So I ended up doing it a week ahead because of the reminder, as opposed to waiting for my time slot. But had I not had time to finish it leading up to that, I had that half hour blocked out to write it. Like, it didn't take a lot of time, but I just needed to make myself do it and to me, my calendar is priority. So anything on my calendar comes first above anything else. And certainly there are things you need to prioritize. So Daniel knows I had to change my first schedule to time for this because I had a meeting with our president come up. And so yes, Daniel is a priority, but I knew he would be flexible, and meeting with the president is not flexible. So like things like that too, just prioritizing, what makes the most sense to get done. I always say, if you have 5 minutes to do it today, rather than put it off until tomorrow. Anything that can be done in 5-10 minutes, just do it right away. And that's a life lesson too. Like, if you can just put your laundry away, just go ahead and do it instead of waiting for tomorrow. Okay, and I think that, Daniel, is all I have on those 3 that I highlighted.
Wonderful. So we are calendar twins. We keep ourselves organized the same way there.
Yeah, it's so helpful, and you get the reminders, and it just keeps you on track. Outlook rules my life.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you for taking the time today. My final question, well, thank you for sharing all this great advice, especially from the arts, theater kind of realm here. My final question is just what can students do now while they're in college, while they're at McDaniel to strengthen these skills, these abilities surrounding professionalism?
Yeah, of course. So I already said it before, but I absolutely recommend looking through these behaviors and picking out the ones that aren't maybe coming naturally to you and think about how you can practice those. So if if you're someone who isn't naturally organized and doesn't do checklists and sort of feel like you're missing things or you're not using a calendar, maybe practice using a calendar, even if it's just for like, this is my laundry day, this is when I'm eating my meals, just to get used to that, because the culture of a lot of organizations is using a calendar. And frankly, we use a calendar, like I will use a calendar to schedule meetings with other people. So it's important that it's always up to date. Again, if you're typically running behind schedule, what changes can you make in your daily routine to make yourself ahead of schedule so you're not behind? Being present and prepared and, demonstrating dependability. You should always be on time or early. There is absolutely no excuse to be late, unless there's an emergency, obviously. But don't show up to a meeting 5 minutes late with a Starbucks in your hand. That's highly unprofessional. You need to leave the house earlier, or don't get the Starbucks if it's going to make you late for your meeting. So, what habits do you have right now that are preventing you from being on time that you can adjust or wake up earlier, or, whatever works with that. If you don't have a professional wardrobe, might be time to start considering like what professional items you need, like staples to have in your closet, to make sure that when you do get called for that interview, you're totally prepared and you can think about preparing for the organization and not worrying about what you're going to wear, because that should be an easy thing. And then the other thing I would recommend practicing is that it's really easy to make plans and bail on your friends or family or things like that. So if something's on your calendar, try to practice not canceling, and unless you're sick or something that's preventing you, but like try working on those commitments, and that inherently will help you be someone who holds that time with other people more accountably and out of respect for their time, not canceling. So that's something that I started doing. I got in a habit at some point, along the line of just like continually canceling with my friends. And I was like, that's not fair to anybody. Like, we've all reserved this time. And so now if we make plans, it is on our calendars. Calendar is king. And we are having that, cocktail or dinner or whatever we plan to do. So those are just a few things I would recommend sort of starting to do now. I also think it's important to start thinking about what your goals are. And I know it's often in interviews, you'll get the, what's your 5-year plan? What are your goals? Like, you don't need to have the rest of your life planned now, but I think it's important to know sort of the direction you want to go, so that the jobs you do get now or right out of college are helping you build the skills to get to where you want to be. So what are your goals? What skills is this experience going to help you, help you get to that goal? Like for me, for example, like I always ask that, because a lot of the employees that we hire are part-time, at least to start, and some do move full-time either for us or other organizations. And I want to make sure whatever skill they're trying to get from Strathmore, even if it's just, I need experience working with the public, I want to make sure I know that so I can help them be in the situation where they're talking to strangers and building that capacity. So it's important just to know what you want to get out of a job and how it would benefit you, as well as how you would benefit the organization. And I think that just speaks very highly to your preparedness for that interview. I think that's all I got.
And that is perfect. Allison, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your insights, of course, related to Strathmore and the industry. Really, really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Yep, my pleasure. Good luck.
Thank you.